A well-written purpose statement is the most important part of a research proposal, publication, or thesis. The purpose statement will guide your entire study, so it is important to put thought into how it is worded. I am going to show you how to write incredible quantitative purpose statements in this video. For quantitative research purposes, you need a few more things than discussed in part 1 and 2 of this video. The wording of the purpose is very important. First, think about what verb you should use. The researcher's selection of verbs within the purpose guides what is most appropriate for the rest of the study. In quantitative research, your purpose should indicate if you want to describe something, compare groups, or test the relationship between variables. The way the purpose is worded will guide if a question or hypothesis is appropriate. If you use the word test or compare, for example, you are likely working with a well-researched topic and can test a hypothesis instead of using a research question to guide the study. Always include the population and variables in your purpose. The population needs to be specific so it can guide the inclusion criteria for the study. In quantitative research, the population is the group that you want to make generalizations about at the end of the study. For me, it would normally be nursing students. For example, I may be interested in the use of meditation to increase student success. As stated, the population of students is way too broad to guide my study. Narrowing it to nursing students limits my literature search. Narrowing it to a specific year of nursing students would further limit my sampling frame. Other characteristics, like age or having a particular disease, are also commonly used to limit the target population. The limitations you put on your population will depend on what you want to study. Just be careful when limiting your sample that it isn't too narrow, or you will have a hard time getting participants. All inclusion and exclusion criteria for your study should have a rationale. You don't need to put all these criteria in the purpose, but you do want to identify the main criteria. Look at the literature in your area for some ideas. Quantitative studies measure specific variables, so be sure to include the main variables you will measure in your study. Variables, in a nutshell, are the things that you measure to see if they change. Main variables need to be included in the research purpose. Typically, the independent variable is followed by the dependent variable. Don't worry about identifying all the demographic, extraneous, or confounding variables. You do want to mention the mediating or control variable if there is one in your study. These variables can go between the independent and dependent variable or after the dependent variable, depending on how you word your purpose. In my example, meditation and success are the main variables. The problem is that success is too broad. How will it be measured? A better way to write this purpose would be to measure student grades. I could add other measures of success as well if I wanted to, but for this example, I'm going to stick with just grades. A completely different purpose could look at something like stress instead, or it is possible that I could measure both in my study. I would just want to design the study to control for the influence of any variables other than the independent variable on each of the dependent variables. It is also possible to have more than one intervention to test. Just be careful your study doesn't get too complicated because of too many variables. If appropriate, any proposed relationship among variables should be stated in the wording of the purpose. In my example, the grades are assumed to depend on meditation. Therefore, my independent variable is the meditation, and the dependent variable, the one that is expected to change, is the student grades. I would want to avoid making a judgment about the impact of meditation on grades in the purpose statement. I'll save that for the question or hypothesis. Now, use PICOT format to remind you what else may be needed. Keep in mind that you do not need to use the entire acronym all the time. PICOT is an acronym generally used to develop research questions. We will discuss research questions in another video, but for now, I want to point out that the purpose is different from the question, even in quantitative research. The purpose speaks to the overall goal of the research. It should be one declarative statement. The questions break down the purpose into more specific areas to be investigated. In your proposal, you should have both a purpose and questions or hypotheses. It may help to work on both components at the same time, or even start with your question, then write your purpose. At this point, you should already have your population, intervention or independent variable, if there is one, and any comparison or outcome variables included in your purpose. If you're doing an experimental study, there will be an intervention. For a descriptive study, there will be no intervention, but there can still be an independent variable. The intervention is the independent variable in an experimental study. In my study, it is the meditation. The comparison of interest in my example is assumed by the wording of this purpose to be no meditation. For pragmatic reasons, I may not be able to have a control group. The time frame for the study should also be apparent in the question wording. Adding, while taking a research course, adds the limit of time to the time they are in the course. In the end, my purpose would look something like, the purpose of this quasi-experimental study is to examine the influence of meditation on fourth-year nursing student grades while taking a research course. A descriptive purpose may look something like this. The purpose of this study is to describe the usage of YouTube videos among fourth-year nursing students while taking a research course. Since I'm just describing what is already occurring, there is no intervention. There is also only one variable of interest, the use of YouTube videos. There are many different types of research designs, so once you pick one, go back and see if the purpose is worded in a congruent way. Refine it if needed. Recently, some authors are calling for the addition of D to PICOT format to stand for digital data. My example doesn't have a D, but if you're using a specific technology in your study, it is a good idea to include it in your purpose. If you are specifically testing a theory or model, include the name of the theory right in your purpose statement. Creswell provides a good script to use as a starting point for quantitative purpose statements that test theory. Depending on your study, you may then need to include research questions or hypotheses. I will talk about that in another video. I always tell students that before you submit your research paper, make sure you critique your own purpose statement. To help you, I have some more videos you can use, or you can look up a critiquing tool in your textbook or online. Like in part 2 of this video, I think it would be fun to post your purpose statement below this video and see if others can guess your methodology. Instead of saying the methodology in the purpose statement, as I suggested in part 1 of this series, use an X so you don't give it away. We can help each other critique and refine the purpose statements. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next videos about writing your question or hypothesis and the rest of your proposal.